Hi, today I'm going to talk about Ngx Controller installation. So Ngx Controller is just, to put it simple, it is to monitor and configure Ngx Plus instance. And the Ngx Controller runs in a Kubernetes cluster, like single load or multi-load cluster. So today I'm going to do the installation and show you an installation problem that you may come across. So I downloaded the controller installer package, and I'm going to install the controller. So install -n, which is to use the internal database. Let's start the installation. So it will check what Docker version is running, and okay, so provided the database. So I'm just use local, checking Kubernetes. Loading required packages like kubelet and some other utilities. Installing Kubernetes components. So basically it's loaded the kubeadmin and runs kubeadmin to start the Kubernetes cluster. This may take a while. And we can open another SSH window to this machine, and let's monitor the log. Let's just monitor the kubelet. Okay. So here we see some error, I think. Yeah. So here it says Kubelet services failed. Interesting. So here it says failed to start ContainerManager, failed to initialize top-level QoS containers, failed to update the top-level burstable QoS Cgroup, failed to set supported Cgroup subsystems for Cgroup, failed to find a subsystem mount for required subsystems PIDs. What does this mean? So we can probably Google search this error log, and let's see what happens. As you can see, the installation failed. So what I found from the internet is this Kubernetes issue report. So this person got the same error log as I do. So he said if they restart, Kubelet returns fatal error with similar logs again. It makes sense since our kernel version doesn't support Cgroup's PIDs controller. So we disabled the Cgroup's PIDs related feature gates. Support pod PIDs limit, support load PIDs limit. So disable these two feature gates, and expecting the kubelet would not require PID subsystems, but the errors continued. So he also showed the code, which is here, 329, set Cgroup's fs PIDs group to true. Interesting. So what does he means when he talk about this? Kernel version doesn't support Cgroup's PIDs controller. So I did some more research, and I can show you what he means here. So here, if we check what Cgroup support, we can check Cgroups, and this is what Cgroups support subsystem. So it's support CPU set, CPU accounting, memory, right? And if we look at the code here, in the Kubernetes code, it says support Cgroup's memory group, CPU group, PIDs group, subsystem. But here we have CPU, we have memory, we don't have PIDs, process ID. So let's check another machine, see if we have. So this is another virtual machine, and here I cat the /proc/cgroups. We have CPU subsystem support. We have memory subsystem support. We have process IDs, PIDs, subsystem support. Okay, so that's the problem. Here, this machine, we don't have PIDs support. And this machine, so how you enable the PID support, it's actually controlled by this kernel config. If you check your kernel config, and if you find config Cgroup PIDs equal Y, then it's supported. In most of the distribution, it is supported by default, but you may have some distribution that does not have this kernel config enabled, so you will not have Cgroup PID support. Okay, so but you can. So he also mentioned we disable Cgroup's PIDs related feature gates, support pod limit, support node limit, node PIDs limit. So you can use feature gate to disable the PIDs Cgroup, and it probably should work. And let's try the installer here. And so in Ngx Controller Installation, this is where we enable and disable the feature gate. So here we have feature gates. Let's see here. We disable the pod PIDs limit feature gate and the node PIDs limit feature gate. Let's save this. Kubelet config YAML file. Then let's run the uninstall first, and run the install again. So this time it should work. So let's so here it says look at this code line. It looks like the PID subsystem will always be required. So here, because here it's by default it's set to true, and here if we have this feature enabled, feature gates enabled, or this feature gates enabled, it will set it to true. So no matter what, PID Cgroups will always be true for the newer Kubernetes cluster. So this is actually in this commit, but in Ngx Controller, we are installing the Kubernetes 1.15.5 version, which does not require Cgroup PIDs once you disable the feature gate. I can show you the. So this is a Kubernetes source code. I check out the branch v1.15.5 version, and so if we group that error message, okay, so this is an installation script continues. So we accept the license. As you can see, the Kubernetes components installation completed, and which means that the problem is avoided by disable the feature gate, the pod process ID limit feature gate, right? So, and I can show you the Kubernetes code for version 1.15.5. So once you disable the feature gate, it should work. But for newer Kubernetes version, it will not work even if you disable the pod PIDs limit feature gate. So I can show you Okay, so this is where the code is, source code, and required subsystem, required sub. So here is a get supported subsystems for Cgroup. Let's look at this function here. So you see the difference for Kubernetes version 1.15.5. It has the Cgroups fs PIDs group by default set to false, unless you enable the support path limit PIDs limit feature gate, or enable the support node PIDs limit feature gate. So if you have either feature gates enabled, it will set it to true. But if you disable the feature gate, it will be false. So which means if you run version 1.15.5, you disable the feature gate. So even if you don't have Cgroup PIDs feature subsystem enabled in kernel, you can still run Kubernetes cluster. And but unfortunately for this person, he's out of luck. The newer version, Kubernetes version, had the Cgroups always set it to true. Yeah. So this is the this is what I want to talk in this video. Hope you learn. And so I don't want to continue the rest of the installation to save time. So let's end it here. Okay.